Today is Veterans Day, and as we honor our nation's heroes this Veterans Day, the acute crisis that our armed services, driven by Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's blockade on military promotions, may finally be nearing an end. After 9 long months of Tuberville playing dangerous, politically self-serving games with our national security and their lives over his opposition to service members being able to access abortion health care. A group of senators has introduced a measure that would allow the nearly 370 promotions that Tuberville has single-handedly held up to be voted on at once. This would need to be approved by the Rules Committee, which is scheduled to vote on the proposal Tuesday before heading to a full vote of the Senate, where it needs 60 votes to pass. Normally, getting 60 votes on anything in this highly divided Senate is described as nearly impossible, but Tuberville has changed all that. His blockade is enraging even members of his own party. Here is Alaska Senator and Colonel in the Marine Corps Reserves, Dan Sullivan.
Our General Officer Corps is saying, you know what, I've done 30 years in, 7 deployments, I'm going to be held up, I'm going to get out. If we start driving our best flag officers out of the military, this is going to be viewed as a national security suicide mission. His words, not ours. Tuberville, though, isn't content with the 9 months of a suicide mission he has carried out. He's now trying to further imperil our national security by attempting to hold up the annual National Defense Authorization Act. One member of Congress, Adam Smith, tells Politico this, quote, "No, screw him. He lost, and he's trying to tear down this country because he disagrees with the policy." Joining our conversation, retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, co-founder of Operation Saving Democracy, Amy McGrath, is back with us. Joining me at the table, founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, host of the Independent Americans podcast, Paul Rykoff, is here. We don't say this often enough, but we thank you for being here, and we thank you for your service to the country. Amy, what can be done about someone like Tuberville?
Well, I think the Senate's going to have to really look at this going forward, because ultimately we can't have one senator holding up and hurting our military and our national security in such a way. It has been 9 months, and Senator Tuberville has literally weaponized his own position as a United States Senator to actively hurt our military, to actively harm our military readiness and hurt military families. And this has gone on, as you said, for 9 months. What has allowed this to happen is that the rest of the Republican Party and his fellow senators have largely been silent all the way up until now. And so, we can't allow this in the future. And the problem is we see more and more these extremist senators who in the past would be sidelined. No one would listen to them. But now the Republican Party has elevated their most ignorant, most arrogant, least qualified, most embarrassing members to be the leaders of their party. And this is the consequence, and it has real national security concerns.
Yeah, I said this about Vivek Ramaswamy because I was about to say had to watch the debate. It was my privilege to watch the debate. He is what he is, but he's also a reflection of the weakness of the rest of the field. Because if they were stronger, they could shame him. They could beat. It's a contest. In that case, it's a primary contest. I think the same could be said of Tuberville in some ways. It is a sign of the weakness of the Senate leaders on the Republican side that he still wields this power. In the old days, if they stood for something, if they stood with the 83% of Americans, and we know they don't, who think abortion should be legal and allowed and safe in 83% of all or certain instances, or the 100% of Americans who I would imagine are not for doing things that endanger our military, especially with attacks coming at them due to the events in the Middle East, we wouldn't be there. So this is about Tuberville, but it's also about the weakness of the Republicans.
I think that's right. I mean, it's Friday, so welcome to the latest installment of This Week in Stupid with Senator Tommy Tuberville.
Thank you.
Right? It's a special Veterans Day edition.
Right.
He doesn't stop at Veterans Day or any other time, whether there's war in Israel or there's war in Ukraine or officers are leaving the military. He's not going to stop because he's a political suicide bomber. This is the intention of blowing it all up, getting attention, promoting a radical agenda at any cost. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks maybe is encouraging. The only thing outside of Veterans Day that's uniting people is their opposition to Tuberville. Finally, right? We've talked about it for months, and what they have to do is what we do in the military: adapt, improvise, and overcome. If he won't move, they have to move him. They have to go around him, and now finally Schumer's doing that. McConnell has finally started to respond, and Tuberville's feeling the pressure. He's feeling from inside his own party, and he's being moved, and that's ultimately what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to be more dynamic, not just with him, but with the budget coming up, with the NDAA, and everything else that Congress normally gets done. It's time to reevaluate the rules and execute different strategies and tactics.
What does it say? I mean, I also think military readiness isn't understood. Being ready means not being vulnerable, right? It means that, I mean, he's done more than just impede combat readiness, which is actually the Pentagon's current. It started with military readiness. It's now combat readiness that he damaged. That means, and if people were to sort of grab onto this as a message to the country ahead of the elections, that means endangering our military. That means putting people at risk. Who delivers that message? Who takes that message to the country, Amy?
Well, I hope Democrats do, because I believe the Democratic Party is the party of national security now, that the Republican Party is not. And every day we see that more and more. That message of military readiness, we do not have a 7th Fleet Navy commander right now. We don't have a 5th Fleet. Those are the fleets in the Pacific area where we're trying to deter a rising China, a more aggressive China, and in the Middle East where there's active war zones going on right now, where our allies and partners are dying. We don't have these commanders. We don't have a head of Missile Defense Command. We don't have, Cybercom. This has ripple effects, not only for the operational forces, but to military families. And something that we don't talk about enough is the family aspect of this. People sacrifice tremendously to serve their countries. They move their families every 3 years. And to hold this up just hurts these families, and it's a slap in the face. And folks, I couldn't agree with Senator Sullivan even more. He's saying, hey, this is a slap in the face to people that served 30-some years in a nonpartisan way and endure a tremendous sacrifice on themselves and their families to treat them this way. Most senators know this, but the Republican Party is being hijacked by these right-wing ideologues, which Senator Tuberville is one of them, and they are powerless to fight back against him, unfortunately.
And that is the scandal, right? That they rendered themselves powerless against an extremist in their own midst. We'll stay on this story. Thank you for keeping it in focus for us. Amy McGrath, thank you for joining us today.